Welcome back. And I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by European Commissioner Nicolas Schmit. You heard the Taoiseach refer to him earlier, and he has joined us here in studio in Dublin Castle today. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Commissioner, we are very conscious that today's programme of events for the forum takes place against the background of the shocking developments in Ukraine. And we know that this will have an impact on the issues that we were planning to discuss today. Clearly, we don't know what the impact will be. We can only begin to imagine. But perhaps to set us off, just to start off the conversation and to acknowledge the context within which this is taking place, can you perhaps just give us an idea of how you think the EU can respond most immediately to this crisis?
Well, I think that the Taoiseach has already set the importance, but also the tragedy of these events. The importance is about democracy, it's about values. And I think here we are in a way reminded how fundamental our fundamental values are and how we are considered by nations like Ukraine, but also that they are fragile and that they can be threatened from one moment to another. The second one is how we help the Ukrainian people. And I think a lot has been done in a very short time. And this probably was not expected on the side of the dictator. We launched sanctions very efficiently, very rapidly. We are now putting into place all kinds of support for the refugees. We support the Ukrainian people through financial and other aids. So I think the European Union has come closer. Solidarity has been very concrete. We have adopted now a system how people can very easily find support and protection in Europe, and especially in all European member states. So I think this is how we have dealt up to now with this crisis, and certainly we have to be careful what happens and what the impact will be.
And of course, we are very aware that this crisis takes place. It follows the global pandemic, which followed itself the Great Recession. Yeah. So we were already facing challenges in the EU and indeed in the world. And in the morning sessions, we've heard about the impact of the COVID crisis, but we also heard a lot about how the EU and national measures softened the blow to some degree and perhaps offset the worst of those effects, in some countries at least. We've also heard that international commentators think that maybe Europe has done well in some ways. There's been some degree of bounce back in advance of what happened this week. But do you think that maybe we were a little bit too optimistic? Is it a little bit of a false dawn that we were seeing? Can we see this being maintained?
No, nobody really could expect what's happening now. I think it's very difficult for democracies who are accustomed to rational thinking to anticipate something which is of all kind of rationality. Well, we have now learned a lesson that the world, unfortunately, is not as rational, as democratic as we sometimes have the belief it is. Now, I refer to the what has been done during the crisis, and also the Taoiseach mentioned this. I think this is already also a good example how this crisis, major crisis, COVID, crisis, which had an impact on the economy, in many areas, how we responded to it. Next Generation EU is a major program which has helped a lot, not just because there's money in it, but it's also the demonstration that Europe can only solve problems in a solidarity way. And I think this is that was a very clear and strong message. I remember very much at the beginning of this crisis when we launched the SURE program to help countries to finance their short-term employment. And this has been very important also for today, for the recovery, for maintaining the level of jobs. Ireland has, by the way, taken more than 2 billion to finance short-time work. So I think we have learned the lessons from the previous crisis, from the financial crisis, and we have reacted in a very solidarity way, but also in a way that allows us today to have a strong recovery, and I hope that this recovery will not be now under pressure due to this international situation.
And of course, a lot of the measures would look towards ensuring that upward economic convergence continues. But we also want to focus a little bit on the social convergence and maintain that. And in that context, there was the start of the negotiations recently by the Council and the European Parliament on the Directive for adequate minimum wage. And I know that you have been very active in this area particularly. And I understand at one stage that you were saying that the EU's competitiveness cannot be based on low wages. So do you think that the proposal that is on the table at the moment, will this actually serve to reduce inequalities in the labour market?
Yes, first, what you said about economic convergence. Certainly, we need economic convergence. We need a very competitive European economy. But this has to go hand in hand with social convergence. Because if we do not have this social convergence, we are permanently in a situation where Europe is breaking apart. So I think social convergence is important for our societies, social cohesion, but it's also important in the European context. And it is important for strong, innovative societies. We are now in a period where we have big challenges. Technology is a big challenge. Digitalization is the challenge for our life, for our economy, for our competitiveness, for our position in the world economy. And this means we have to invest a lot in people, in people's skills, in people's talents, in young people's talents. And this is when I said, well, you cannot build a future on very low skills and low wages. So this is the challenge we have to face. And that's the minimum wage gives a strong signal. We have to, unfortunately, 10% of Europeans are working poor. They work hard and they cannot make a living out of their work. And I remember when President von der Leyen started in her first speech to the European Parliament, I was at that time a member of that parliament, she said, well, everybody should have a decent living out of his or her work. And that's what we try with this proposal, to improve living conditions, better minimum wages, to bring social partners together and invest in people in their skills.
And that is, you referred there to the changes, I mean, certainly from COVID, but also the digitalization, the increased automation, and I think the changing world of work. And we heard a lot about that in Barbara Gerstenberger's session this morning, the pros and cons of the new way of working, hybrid working. But I suppose there is a question to be asked, because we were very quick to embrace it during the period of the lockdowns. But were we perhaps a little bit too quick? Because it seems that there are some issues that are emerging. The right to disconnect is one, which has been on the European agenda, policy agenda, but many others, like for young people, the right to connect may be something that they feel is missing. There are issues being raised about work-life balance, for example. There are other issues relating to gender equalities. Do you think perhaps were we too quick to embrace this brave new world of working?
No, I do not think that we were too quick. Certainly, the COVID crisis has been a fantastic accelerator of transformations, especially in relation to remote working. But it was also a fantastic opportunity. Hadn't we got this possibility, if COVID had taken place 20 years ago, we would not have been able to set up this way of reacting. And COVID in that sense has saved our economies, has saved a lot of sectors, have permitted us to continue work exchange, communicate. And in that sense, I think our reaction was very good. I remember the first meetings we had online, sometimes quite difficult to connect and so on. This has been improved a lot. And I think this has to stay. This will stay with us. Now, you're right to say we have now to take care of the other consequences of this transformation. We have to look at the social impact, the way how work will be organized in the future, how we keep remote working, but also we keep certain values, work-life balance, also the inclusive character of this transformation. Fortunately, not everybody had the opportunity to work like that. Thinking about remote learning, well, this was not the solution we should keep as such, but we saw that a lot of children were excluded, those who had not the computers, access, the connections, and so on. So there is a lot now to work on skills, on digital skills, on the social environment and conditions, the working conditions of this new world, of this new digital world. We are in a technological revolution. Now we have to set the standards, the social standards, the human-centered standards of this technological revolution.
And in some ways that will require a little bit more regulation in certain areas. Right to disconnect is one example only, but what role can the social partners play in this, do you think?
Certainly. Well, you have mentioned the right to disconnect. I think, as I say, humans are not computers, and we have to respect every person's capacity. So I think the right to disconnect is, by the way, it's not just social. It's also for company a very rational attitude, because you should respect the health of your people, of your workers, the health and security, and that is also about the right to disconnect. Now, I think, therefore, we have to work on this now, on all these issues. Regulation, yes, but this is creating the framework, creating level playing fields, because it's not acceptable that in some member states people are well protected, in others they are not protected. So Europe has to guarantee this level playing field for social reasons, but also, by the way, to keep the internal market working correctly. That's about convergence, that's about also social convergence.
Sure. And in that context, actually, you had already proposed one initiative with respect to platform work, which is clearly one area that has developed as part of this new forms of employment that we now see in Europe. It received a little bit mixed reactions. Some actors thought it was very positive. Some believed the status quo should remain. Why do you think that we actually need action in this area? And do you think that if it goes forward, do you think that will help to maintain high quality jobs in this new business model?
Well, when we look at the platform work in general, we are talking about 28 million people working permanently, or most of them occasionally, for platforms. And we expect this number to go up to more than 40 million in a relatively short period. Well, this shows first the technology is there to have a different kind of business model of work organization. Second, well, platform exists because there's a strong demand for this kind of services, of this kind of also work, because a lot of young people work for or on platforms. But we see also that a lot of these workers, they are working under very difficult conditions. And there is no reason why you have a new business model based on technology does not fit into the values, the regulations of our social systems, of our social protection, of labor rights, which have been established during decades and sometimes more. And therefore we propose a system which gives more safety, more legal security, including also to the platform, because a lot of status of platform workers are challenged in courts, and we cannot have this kind of uncertainty permanently. So I think we do not question the platform as such. We want to bring in the platform into some normality in terms of working conditions, in terms of respect also of personal individual freedom. That's the issue of algorithms. What can algorithms do? How far can they control? And how far they always have to be controlled by humans. I do not want to talk to an algorithm. No. I want to talk to a human. I do not want to be controlled by an algorithm without having the possibility to go to a human being and talk and talk about my rights. So I think this is an important proposal, certainly which is discussed because it's a complex matter. But I can tell you, this system of platform was invented mainly in the US. And the feedback I get from the US is that they are very much interested in what we are doing in Europe on this particular issue. And there's a high interest among a lot of people, including in universities, trade unionists, but also at the state level for our proposal on platform work.
And I suppose that touches on the digital transition that we mentioned and that we will come back to later in this afternoon's discussion also. But if you look at the other transition that's fundamental to what's our future in Europe, and it's the climate change element. And it's clear that the impact of this transition is going to have different effects on different groups. And it is very possible that that will see an exacerbation of inequalities. We talk about a fair transition, we talk about a just transition, we talk about leaving no one behind. But how can policymakers like you actually ensure that we do that we transition in digital and in green, but that we continue to protect the most vulnerable?
Well, the green transition, as the digital, by the way, has a very, very broad, offers very broad opportunities, also for the economy. When I listen to some ministers coming from different member states and they explain to me what happens in their industry, in their different production sectors, I'm amazed because we are already in this process of transformation. And there are a lot of new jobs created. And these are very often, or mostly, very good jobs, quality jobs. This is, by the way, also referring to platform, the question of quality job, which is important. And therefore, I am optimistic that investment in this climate change, in this transformation, will create good jobs. But we have to allow people to change, to transit from one job to another, which brings us back to skilling, upskilling, and not this fear that people will end up in long-term unemployment. So I think this is, on the labor market, a big challenge. On the other side, certainly, and we are going through this period of increasing cost in terms of energy. This is hopefully a transitionary period for the reasons we all know. We have to take measures to mitigate, to soften the impact of the costs of this transition and also of the present situation. So I think this is very important to have always in mind this just transition approach on employment, on jobs, but also on the impact on people's lives and income, and certainly lower income households are presently suffering a lot because of the dramatic increase of oil prices and gas and energy as a whole. Therefore, there is a challenge also here to first, in the short term, to have social measures to mitigate that, and second, then to invest more in renewables, because that we have now learned the lesson that our dependency on oil, on gas, is too high and that we have really to accelerate these investments.
And of course, what you refer to there is even more acute in the current circumstances with what's going on in Ukraine. But also when when we talk about the past week's events, but also the transitions, the transformation in the way that we work, that we live. I mean, coming to my last question really to you at this stage, we have a much revered poet in Ireland who is no longer with us called Seamus Heaney, and he talked about the moment of the great sea change when hope and history rise up in a tidal wave of justice. And I'm wondering whether even before this week's events, could we have seen this as a moment where it really is the beginning of a new Europe, where we could see a transformation of the way that we live and that we work, that's fair and inclusive and that works for everyone. And I was thinking about that in the context of what the Taoiseach referenced, the Conference on the Future of Europe, which took place here last week in the same buildings. And knowing that it's the European Year of Youth, looking at that transformation, what can you say to them? What hope can you see in the future for them?
Well, I think this is a very nice, you quoted this poem, this is, I would say, this is a real political program everybody should support. I think what we have to tell our young generation is that we want a Europe first which is based on solidarity. But solidarity is not just between member states, it's also solidarity in our societies. And the young people have suffered a lot during the COVID. There's a lot of questions now about their jobs. They have been affected by precariousness, and that's also related to platform or other kinds of jobs. And these are things we have really to work on, and we have to change. I've heard just before coming here into this meeting that unemployment has dropped a lot in Europe again, including also youth unemployment, which is good. But now we have to prepare the future. The young, they are challenging us on climate change because they understand that if we are not doing it immediately, they will pay the highest price if climate is worsening. So we have to do that with them, for them. Second, they can have the better side of technology, technological change. And therefore it's so important to have this human-centered technological approach for the young, for their world of work, but also for their life and in a way for society and democracy. So I think we adopted, and the Taoiseach referred to it, this Porto agenda, the action plan for the Pillar of Social Rights. And the Pillar of Social Rights finally designs a vision of a society which is economically efficient, but at the same time also based on social values and very concrete social values, including a topic which I know is very close to the heart of the Irish, but not only the Irish, like housing, doing something on this. And I think we have really to give our young generation confidence, because Europe is about confidence. And the Future of Europe debates show that what finally the citizens ask from Europe is really to center also on their concerns, on their fears, and meaning also on their proposals. When I look at the proposals citizens are making, I'm quite confident and optimistic, because this is what we would like to do and what we are, by the way, doing. We talked about the minimum wage. This is one aspect. Platform, better working conditions, better safety in the world of work, a lot of other things. So that's Europe that protects, that's Europe that takes citizens' concerns very serious and brings concrete solutions to them.
Well, that's a very hopeful, upbeat message to finish on. So thank you very much, Commissioner. I think we will break for lunch now, and we will see you all back here, I hope, at 2 o'clock Dublin time. Thank you all for listening.